Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight I want to welcome Timothy Renner. He is an illustrator, author, paranormal investigator, folk musician, and creator of Strange Familiars podcast, and he lives in Pennsylvania. His illustrations have appeared on the pages of various books, magazines, and comics, as well as on many record and CD covers. Since 1995, he has been making music both solo and with his band Stone Breath. Stone Breath has released over a dozen albums. He makes regular appearances on paranormal radio show Where Did the Road Go? And has appeared on a guest on many other podcasts and radio programs, including Coast to Coast AM. Timothy, welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we get started tonight, I have a very special announcement to make. I hope you don't mind, Timothy. It's about an extremely profound experience I had last night. I am in no way ready to talk about it completely yet because I really need a lot more time to process what happened before I can completely explain it and talk about it with all of you. But I'm going to give you a basic overview and tell you as much as I can right now. It was an experience that changed everything in my life, and it was extremely profound, and I apologize if I get a little emotional talking about it. Now, those of you that have followed me from the beginning, you know that I've always had an extreme passion about finding out about the nature of reality, about what we are, consciousness, spirituality, the paranormal, UFOs, etc. And I've always known it's all connected in some way. But you also know that I've always admitted that I myself have never experienced anything that I can say is 100% genuine, paranormal, unexplained phenomenon. Until the other day, I saw my first UFO. It was really cool, but in my mind, it was not proof of anything. It could have been, swamp gas. It could have been a satellite. I don't know, but I thought it was something pretty cool. Now, still, nothing profound has happened up until last night. Also, those of you that have been following me know that I have a serious meditation block and have never been able to get past a certain point when it comes to meditating. And I kind of figured out why. It's because I'm afraid to go past a certain point, or I was. And last night I decided to meditate, and I decided to really relax and just see what happens and go with it. And like I said, I'm really not ready to talk about everything right now, but what I can tell you is my consciousness, it went to a different place. And I wholeheartedly believe that I made 100% genuine contact with another intelligence. Those that have done this are the only ones that can tell you that they believe it because they've experienced it. I've experienced it now, and now I can wholeheartedly say it changed my life, and I am a true believer in the experience. I can also tell you that the amount of pure love, unconditional love, acceptance, and wonderful energy that I felt while communicating with this entity that I can only describe as an angelic presence is unlike anything I have ever felt. And I know now, out of all of the so many contactees that I've interviewed, the ones that are genuine, because they describe this type of psychic communication that I experienced last night, where I would ask a question to this wonderful, beautiful entity, and the answer would come instantaneously as I was asking the question. And the knowledge and the information that I was receiving was so complex and profound. I knew it. There was no way it could have been coming from me. And I had just this overwhelming feeling that this is it. This is contact. This was my verification about the phenomenon that I've been researching my whole life, and it was the most profound experience of my life so far, and it has changed my paradigm completely about everything. I see everything completely different, and when I am ready, I will go further into the story And let me tell you, the information that I was given by this entity is something that I will need time and guidance to come to terms to and process. It's heavy. It involves all of us, and it 100% needs to be shared. But for now, I have a lot of processing to do about the information that I was given before I can share any more. But I did feel the need that I had to share that with you because, hey, this is the basis of my show is finding out about this. And I myself never thought I would have the experience, and it changed my life. But anyway, for tonight's show, it's going to be awesome. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Timothy.
Can I flip the script on you and become the interviewer for a second?
You sure can. Sure.
So how long was it between seeing the UFO and this experience you're talking about?
It was almost 2 weeks.
That's a very, very interesting detail, though. I won't press you any more on it. You talk when you're ready to talk about it, but that's just an interesting detail to note.
Yeah, I thought so, too. But anyway, man, tonight's going to be awesome. We're going to be getting into some of this phenomenon that we spoke about. And first, I'd love to hear what got you started down your path.
Oh my goodness. Well, I had weird stuff happen as a child. I had a UFO sighting that I remember when I was very young. I want to say maybe 8 years old. My mother came in my room and woke me up and said, "Do you want to see a UFO?" And what 8-year-old kid is going to say no to that?
Right.
Of course I want to see a UFO. So there's some missing time associated with that, or what may be missing time. It could just be memory lapse. I don't know. It was a long time ago. It was a little over 40 years ago. But the way I remember it is I remember standing in the driveway looking at this glowing, would appear to be a craft, like something with lights that moved around the center of it, a saucer shaped or thereabouts, and over the horizon, the trees in the horizon across the street from my house, we were standing in the driveway. And after a while, what I remember is my brother and sister and my mother becoming bored because it wasn't doing anything. It was just sitting there hovering, and they said, "Well, we're going inside." And I know it seems weird that they would leave an 8-year-old out, but this was in the 1970s. It was a different time, and we had a very protective dog, so I think they were pretty confident leaving me out in the driveway with the dog. And the next thing I remember is looking at the same UFO from inside the house from a window. So I don't remember how I got in the house. I don't know what that was, other than I could say it was a UFO.
Wow.
And but funny enough, my whole life I was interested in Bigfoot and ghosts more than UFOs. And later on, went to have some kind of pretty typical gray alien experiences, we'll call them. I don't think they're aliens, but as far as space aliens, they're alien to us. They're other, but I don't think they don't come from another planet. But for shorthand, we can call them gray alien experiences. I did have those in college and afterwards, starting in college, I'll say. A few experiences with that. But really, my interest has always been with Bigfoot, which I loved since I was a kid. And growing up in the 70s, we had In Search Of and Legend of Boggy Creek, and the Patterson Gimlin film had just come out, and just all that great Bigfoot stuff. And I just loved it the minute I saw it as a kid. Just fell in love.
I think Bigfoot is an awesome place to start, because I've just recently started looking more into the Bigfoot phenomenon and been doing more shows on it. And I really, it's amazing to me. It's an amazing phenomenon because there's so much surrounding it that is mystical and unexplained. And I think more researchers of different fields need to get together to kind of discuss this phenomenon, because there's something to it, and it's not, I don't think it's just a hominid ape creature that's just hiding out in the woods. What are your thoughts on that?
100% agree. If pressed, I do a lot of radio shows and podcasts and stuff, and a lot of times the host will say, press me, and they'll say, like, well, what is Bigfoot? Well, the true answer is I don't know. And anybody who says they do know is lying to you, because they don't know either. I have a guess that it's something to do with this wild man archetype, that we've always had a wild man that walks next to us in the woods since we've been walking. The entire history of mankind, every culture has a wild man, and they sort of act like genus loci, like spirits of place. But the danger when I say things like archetypes and spirits, I know people think something very ethereal. They think I'm talking about something, either ethereal or unreal. And I want to stress that, I've talked to enough witnesses and had weird stuff happen to me in the woods, to the point where, something is out there, and it can be, very, very physical. Maybe it's always physical, maybe not. I tend to think it's not always physical. It can be apparitional or physical. And I know that's a hard concept. It's really hard concepts to talk about. Something that can be both apparitional and physical, but it's worth kind of entertaining these ideas, I think, because if you just look at the physical aspects of the Bigfoot phenomenon, you're not going to go far before you realize there's a whole lot of weirdness that surrounds this. If you're going to try to claim it's an undiscovered primate or a relic hominid, there's so much weirdness that surrounds it. I mean, my latest book's called Where the Footprints End. I wrote it with Joshua Cutchin. We did 2 volumes.
Joshua, I've had him on too.
We did 2 volumes of this, 2 thick volumes. We had to break it up into 2 volumes because it was too much to fit in 1 volume. The volume 1's out, volume 2's coming out later this year. But there's no shortage of this weird stuff that goes along with Bigfoot. And you have a very hard time explaining, why this supposed undiscovered primate has all this weird stuff happening around it, and why it disappears sometimes when people see it, or people will see half a Bigfoot, or they'll see a Bigfoot walking through the woods carrying a glowing orb or something like this. So there's so much strangeness associated with it that, in my opinion,
UFOs associated with too, like
sure.
lights and orbs, and yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I've said, I say it's a joke, but it's kind of half joking that if you find me a Bigfoot sighting in Pennsylvania, I'll find you a UFO sighting somewhere in the area, within a few days or a few weeks of it. It's a little bit of a joke, and I can't actually do that with every sighting, but there's a good percentage of the sightings I can do it with. I'll tell you that.
Now, do you think that there are places around the planet, of course, that are just places of a lot of energy that kind of attracts this phenomenon, and it manifests there more in other places?
Yes. But with that being that other phenomena manifest in those places too. So where you get these Bigfoot hot zones, you also get ghost hot zones and UFO hot zones and other strange creatures that maybe like shouldn't be there, like either very rare creatures or things that are supposed to be extinct. You get, all this kind of weirdness bundled together. So yeah, there are places like that, but it's not just Bigfoot.
Now, have you yourself ever had what you would consider a Bigfoot encounter?
I've had an encounter that answers to the description of Bigfoot. See how carefully I phrased that? Because I didn't see. So I've had a couple encounters in the woods, and the one time I saw something, it was so big and so fast that I can't tell you what it was. I can only tell you it was running away from me, and it was bigger than anything that should be in the woods in Pennsylvania. And my initial thought when I saw it, because I'd seen moose in Massachusetts when we were there before, was oh my gosh, there's a moose. And of course there's no moose in Pennsylvania. And then but that was just based on the awkward, or at least different way it moved. It didn't move like a deer, and moose have this weird gait, and the size of it wasn't based on, it didn't look like that. I only got a brief glimpse of it. Excuse me. And then another separate event, I was camping one night and was woken up by wood knocks, probably, I'm guessing from how loud they were, probably maybe 50 yards at the most from my tent, which were answered by other knocks on the other side of it. And I actually had enough forethought to hit record on my recorder when I woke up, and I actually caught these, and you can hear them in stereo. You can see them in the channel. You can hear the one knock and see it in one channel and hear the answer in the other channel. They sound different too, different in tone. And that was a pretty harrowing experience. And whatever that was, had to be somebody or something with hands. Now, we were camping 6 miles from anywhere, and we'd hiked all around that day. There were no people around us. There just weren't any other campers there. We wanted to know who was around us. So someone or something with hands, came right up to our camp and started what sounded like banging on trees with logs. And when we woke up in the morning, now the rest of that night, we heard screams and Weird Al sounds. That's OWL, not Weird Al, the singer. And something walked around our camp for most of the rest of the night until daylight, and all these other strange things. But in the morning, I'd had my pack tied to a tree with paracord, and I was untying my pack. I hadn't gone around the backside of the tree. I had it tied in the front, and the cord wrapped around the back. So I untied it, and I'm swinging the cord around. And when I swing the cord around, this rusty bed spring comes around on the cord. Now, something with hands, or someone, maybe it been people, took this spring and wound it onto that paracord. If you can imagine a spring, how you can wind it, it onto the cord. And just really shocking, because that means, if this was a person, they walked up on a campsite of two guys. Now, we didn't have firearms, but we were otherwise armed. And, I don't think we would have taken that lightly if somebody in our campsite just messing around. So whoever it was, they were like a ninja, because they didn't wake either of us up. My buddy was just sleeping under a tarp, so his was wide open. Whatever it was would have had to been staring right at him sleeping. And it just came right into camp and did that. So, was that Bigfoot? I don't know. Certainly something with hands had to do those two things, had to knock on those trees and twist that spring into that cord.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Some of the physical evidence that has been come across. The footprints are one thing, and then we have tree knocks, and I've heard of structures being built in the woods, and even a type of like communication with twigs and using different types of things that are seemingly these beings are communicating back by building structures or using these items in certain ways. Is this something you've come across?
Oh yeah, I've heard tons of stories of it. I've written a lot about it, and I'm very hesitant about the way I describe this stuff, because I just don't know what is doing these things in the woods. But I have had an exchange with something where I was stacking rocks. I found some rocks in an area one time that it was bright white quartz, so it caught my eye. And it looked like someone had been sitting there and just smashing this they were sitting on top of a boulder, just smashing this quartz on a boulder. So all these quartz splinters all around, and these quartz rocks were everywhere. And I stacked them up. I made what's called a cairn. I made a little cairn on the boulder, and came back to this area. Now, this isn't way out in the wilderness. This is a park. It's like anybody could get to this. But I came back to the area, and they were changed about a week later. Oh, that's interesting. Somebody, at this point I'm thinking it's another person, somebody has changed these. So I changed them again. Came back maybe 2 weeks later after that, and they were changed again. I thought, okay, now somebody's doing this, and they're here as much as I am. So I started to visit more frequently. I started to visit once or even sometimes twice a week. And I'd change them, and I'd come back, and they'd be changed every single time. Sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly changed. Well, this went on for a long, long time. And one time, it was in January of I forget the year. So January of 2017, I believe. And I've been doing this at this point for over 6 months. This ongoing exchange. There was a light coating of snow on the ground. I was walking up to this area on this boulder where I was stacking these rocks, and I heard what sounded like rock clacking behind me. It sounded like just somebody taking two rocks and smashing them together. Now, there was no one else in the parking lot when I got there. That doesn't mean there were no other people there, but there were no other cars there. So I turned around. I kind of looked in the direction where it was. I couldn't see anything. And I proceed up the hill. On the way up the hill, this whole murder of crows. They would nest in the trees, and they would alert to me being there because I was there so often. They would announce my presence and kind of call at each other, but they never really freaked out. Well, this day, for whatever reason, they just freaked out, and they came out of the tree, tons of these birds. I mean, just almost black in the sky. These birds came out of the tree, but they flew real low over my head. Like if I raised my walking stick, I could have probably knocked one out of the air. And I thought, boy, that's strange, but I didn't think it was that strange until everything else that happened. So I go up to the area where I was stacking these stones, and suddenly I get hit by this smell. Now this is in January. It's not like in the middle of summer where, a dead animal smell will just carry and just hang in the air. It gets real kind of sickly. But I get hit with this smell of like skunk mixed with dead animal. And at the same time, I get this fear response, this uncontrollable fear response. I'd been hiking in this park for years before I ever started stacking these stones there. I know it like the back of my hand. I hike there alone all the time. And, there's no reason for me to be afraid, but I just had this fear response that just told me to run. I just run. And I couldn't because I was so afraid my knees were locked up. So at this point I hear sounded like a wood knock from the opposite direction that rock clack came from. And I'm pretty terrified. And I know all these are aspects of Bigfoot sightings, so I'm kind of telling myself better toughen up because you're about to get what you asked for all these times. You're about to see something here. And I was not ready. I was very, very scared. And then I heard just 3 clicks. I describe it as sounding like little gears, not great big thunderous gears, just little gears, little tiny gears, like a little bit bigger than watch gears. Just click, click, click. That's what I heard. Came from the same direction as those, the wood knock. And then it all went away. All the fear went away. All the bad smell went away. It's like in an instant. It all went away. I was able to restack the stones, and I'm walking out of there and coming off of a game trail. And I didn't notice this on the way up, were a series of footprints. Now, I call them maybe footprints because they're not going to convince anybody of anything. You couldn't see toes in them. It's just a real light coating of snow, but they were foot-shaped, huge, like probably 16-inch footprints that came off a game trail with about a 4-foot stride, I'd say, 4 to 5 foot stride, and walked across the main trail and up into a cornfield. Now, I didn't see those on the way up, but I wasn't particularly looking for them. Maybe they were there, maybe they weren't. I don't know. But it was just added with these other things. It was just this really, really weird situation. I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but it continues from there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
Okay. So I continued going there and stacking those rocks into the spring of that year. And the way it ended at that location was one day I cut myself. The quartz was really sharp, has like real sharp edges. And I cut myself on the quartz and I bled just all over it. It was just a really bad cut. And I thought, wow, this should really, really amp things up. This will really make things go crazy here. And so I stacked the bloody rocks up and left, and it never happened again, never changed again. That was the end of it at that location. Now,
wow.
There was another location in the park where I found off the trail another stack of stones. Now this is a huge stack of rocks that was in the crotch of a tree, and these rocks were just massive. I would add to this, and every time I come back, it would be taken away. So I think there were 3 big, almost boulders in the crotch of this huge tree. So whatever I put on top of the original thing would always be knocked down. It would always be taken back to the original state. Well, here I started amping things up, and I started leaving food instead of just other stuff, and it would always be taken, but squirrels, raccoons, whatever. Who knows? But then I read in Mike Clelland's book, which is called The Messengers. It's about owls and UFO abductees. If you haven't read it, it's a wonderful book. But he has something in there about a woman who said that she, whenever she wants to see an owl, she just says, kind of out loud, I would like to see an owl today. And then she goes out into the woods or wherever and sees an owl. She says every time it happens. So I wasn't great, real big on owls or anything, but I do collect bones and skulls and things, and have since I was a kid. As long as I don't like gory stuff, as long as they're sun bleached and clean and nice. I'm an artist. I like to draw them. So I've been picking them up since I was a little kid. So I said, I would like antlers today. I said this to the woods, and off I go. And I'm on my trail. I'm walking up to the place where these stones are, and I look off to the side of the trail, and I see something in the tree, and it's kind of blowing in the wind. It caught my eye, and at first I was very angry because I thought someone had left garbage in the park and just tied it in the tree. I thought it was, either a lot of times I found people have left their diapers there, or they've cleaned up after their dog and just tied it in the tree, and it's not nice to have to clean this stuff up. But I thought, well, I use the park, so I try to clean it as I go. So I thought that's what it was until I got off the trail and walked up to it. And what it was the entire tail section of a barn owl. So barn owls are white. So it was just the entire tail section. And it was kind of impaled on, it wasn't a thorn. It was like a little kind of sharp twig that came off of this branch. And it was just pushed on there, just really impaled on there. And I just sat there and just laughed, because here it was, the story was this woman asked for owls and got owls. And here I asked for antlers and I got owls anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, these stories are hard to tell because they kind of jump back and forth. They're not real linear. But around the same time, I'm in an antique store. Again, owls aren't going to be my thing. They're Mike's thing. I had never really even seen too many owls. Despite growing up on a farm, I'd seen maybe one or two owls in my life before this point. And my wife and I are in this antique store, and we walk up to the stand, and it's this whole shelf, like 4 or 5 feet high, just filled with little owl figurines. And I'm looking at them, and they said $1 each. And I was like, this is silly. Like, what are, here's all these owls now. And I said, well, I'm not going to collect owls, but I am drawn to this one. It was kind of most of these were very realistic kind of ceramic owls. But one of these things was like a wooden, it looked more like a folk art carving. I said, oh, I like that. I like that one. So I'm going to get that one for $1. Why not? It's a, wooden carving. So I hand carved this kind of folk art owl. I pick it up and I turn it over to look at the back, and there's a wizard face carved on the back of it. Now, this is important because at this time I've been writing all these Bigfoot books, and I was looking for something else to illustrate. I was getting a little tired of drawing nothing but Bigfoot. I won't say I love drawing Bigfoot, but variety is the spice of life. And I had come across this book called Vita Merlini. It's an old text about the life of Merlin. I thought, oh, that would be fun to draw. I'm going to illustrate the life of Merlin. Well, 2 things happened in the course of this. So I find this owl with this wizard carved on the back of it. Then I find out, as I'm reading this, that Merlin himself had what they call a wild man stage. So he went off to the woods, forsook his clothes, talked to the animals, basically became a wild man. So I was laughing about that I couldn't get away from it. Back to the park, somewhere in the same time period, maybe a few days later, I'm walking again up to this area where I stack the stones, and I hear this loud rustling in the trees, really, really loud. Broad daylight, and something pops out of the trees right in front of me, and it is a barred owl. So the tail section was from a barn owl. This was a barred owl in the middle of the day, pops out of the leaves, flies right in front of me and down the path in the direction I was headed. So here I've got this owl stuff happening. Now back to leaving the food. So I'm leaving food, and then I did something which I would come to regret greatly. I started leaving alcohol, just little glass bottles of wine. And when I did it the first time, I should say I only did it once. I left this little cork glass bottle of wine, and I dropped it down in a void in the tree. It's like in a little knot hole in the tree. And I said out loud to the woods, I would like a skull today. And proceeded to walk probably, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes away in the park from where this tree was. And I'm walking through a field, and I notice this circle of trees in the field. About maybe half an acre size circle of trees. Boy, I've been in this park for years. I've never been in those trees. I thought, well, I'm going to go in there. I wonder what's in there. So I walk into these trees, and it's a big stack of rocks in these trees. it answers to the description. In Ireland, this would be called a fairy fort. I've been told, it was actually by Joshua who told me, we don't have fairy forts here, so I can't call it a fairy fort. But were this in Ireland, this would be considered a fairy fort. Big stack of rocks surrounded by trees in the middle of a field. And I thought, well, I'm going to climb to the top of those rocks and look around, see what I can see. As I'm walking up, I start seeing little bits of fur. I'm like, what's that? A few more steps, and I see the head of a groundhog, freshly decapitated head of a groundhog, the jaw ripped off, and no body anywhere to be seen, just the head. And I look at it for a second, and then I realize I asked for a skull.
Here's your skull.
I got a skull, and completely freaked me out. I wanted nothing to do with this. And now I'm literally backing out of this bunch of trees, kind of like in a daze, like, whoa, that is really, really weird. I asked for a skull. I got a skull. And I'm literally backing out, and I kind of walk the opposite direction from it and end up at the first place where I was stacking stones, where I was stacking those quartz stones. And I realized at that point that sound of that wood knock and the sound of those clicking gears came from the direction. I'm not sure they came from that circle of trees, but they came from that direction. And I was just in this daze and just felt really weird about it. And like, what did I do? You know, I've done,
right.
Yeah, I've done something here. And left the park, came back, I think maybe one time in the interim, and then came back again with my son. My son wanted to take a hike one day. Now, again, this is one of those spider web knots I was talking about. It's hard to describe. So the night before, I was on a podcast, and we were discussing, I don't know if you're familiar with the filmmaker Seth Breedlove. He does the Small Town Monsters movies.
Yes.
Yeah, so we were discussing Seth Breedlove's movies. We were discussing just folklore on how to catch a raccoon. So the guy I was talking about old Southern folklore about he puts coins in a jug, and the raccoon will reach in and grab something shiny in the jug, and then won't let go. And then in the morning, you'll find the raccoon with his hand in the jug. It's this old folklore about how to catch a raccoon. We were discussing that, and we were discussing paranormal stuff in general and how we thought it was like the Great Eye of Sauron when you put on the ring, in the Lord of the Rings. Like as soon as you put on that ring, start messing with it, it's like the Great Eye turns and looks at you. We had mentioned all this stuff, and I literally got off the phone with this fellow that I was doing the podcast with. I said, look, I promised my son I'd hike in the morning, gotta go. So that's literally how we ended the conversation. Go out hiking the next day with my son. It's a rainy day, but I don't mind hiking in the rain. We parked at what's called the Crossroads parking lot. It's literally named the Crossroads parking lot. So we started at Crossroads, which is important in paranormal stuff. And it literally falls on the crossroads. We do our hike, and we're coming back, and my son's in much better shape than I. He usually hikes about 20 or 30 yards ahead of me just because he's way better shape than me, and I'm lagging behind. And I see him stop, and he kind of straightens up, and I could tell he's looking at something. So I catch up to him, and I said, what do you see there? What are you looking at? And he points it out. He's like, is that a raccoon down there? I said, oh, yeah, that's a raccoon. And he takes another step towards us. I said, no, we're going to take another trail because that shouldn't be out during the day. And before we could even turn around to walk away, this thing starts running at us and snarling and growling and hissing and making all kinds of noise. So I told my son to run, and I took about 2 steps and looked behind me and realized I am not outrunning this thing. This is not happening. So I just had to put myself between my son and this thing, and I carry a big walking stick, which answers to the description of a wizard's staff. It's got protection symbols all over it. It's my favorite thing to hike with. It's been with me for years, and it's helped me out in many situations when I've fallen and so forth. Helped me get up. I have multiple sclerosis, so it's been my friend for many a year. And this thing's just coming at me, and I said, well, I got one shot here, and I broke its back with the first shot, and I don't know if that's skill or luck or what happened with that. I don't know. But it didn't get me, and more importantly, it didn't get my son.
Right.
I did have cuts all over my legs, so I did end up having to get rabies shots because I broke open this thing's skin when I hit it. So whenever there's anything exposed, and you have anything exposed, you have to get rabies shots. But in any case, I walked away and caught up with my son, and jokingly said, without thinking, I jokingly said, my only regret is that I didn't yell, "You shall not pass," before I smashed this thing with my wizard staff, and didn't even think about having talked about the Eye of Sauron the night before. So we walked back to the parking area, and I thought, well, I better, this has been an animal attack. I better call a park ranger. So I called the park service and said, you better send a ranger up here. I had a raccoon attack. So they send a ranger up. Ranger gets out of his truck, and he's got his name tag on, and it says Breedlove. And that is not a common name at all around here. So now I'm just like, what is going on with this? It was just all these synchronicities around this event. And I just had a bad feeling about it. It just felt like more than coincidence, the whole thing. So all these things, just together, just really, really weighed on me. Then I started researching folklore as far as like gifting and spirit gifting and so forth. And there's a lot of the folklore from the Norse and Germanic tradition is what I was researching. And they said, don't ask for things. Don't, when you're messing with this stuff, and don't ask for anything. But if you do, and it gives it to you, you better take it, because it gets gravely offended if you ask for something and you don't take it. And I mean, hey, that's what I did. Now I don't know if it's all connected or not, but that's what I did, and that's what happened afterwards. And I've never been able to shake the feeling that there was something more to that event because of all the synchronicities that surrounded it. There was something more to that event than just a random attack.
Wow. Did you ever go back and check to see if the bottle of wine?
Okay, so the bottle of wine, the next time I went, it was gone. So I dropped it down in this knothole, and it was a big enough knothole to drop it in, but I couldn't reach my hand in it. A little kid could get their hand in it, right? So somebody had a little kid, and they said, hey, reach in there and get it. That's possible. But it was gone the next time. I couldn't see it. Then the following time after that I checked, it was back again, same place. And then every time since that I've gone, it's not been there.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And man, like you were saying, when your conversation about the Eye of Sauron, it just made me think, I guess you could say conversation I had last night. I was told that now that I've kind of broken through to this next level, that certain things will take notice. And just to be aware of that. And I find that so fascinating, that how this phenomenon can interact with your consciousness. And, like you said, if you ask for something, you better take it. That's so crazy that it would get, offended. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, and this is in the old folklore, and I hadn't thought about it too much until I'm reading this old folklore, and I did exactly that. I'm participating in this essentially what is spirit gifting. Now, I think at some point I thought maybe this was Bigfoot that I was dealing with. Like when I was stacking those rocks, I thought maybe, especially after I got the smells and the wood knocks and stuff, I thought, but then as time goes on, I think no, I think it's something else. I think it's something like more of a spirit gifting thing I'm doing with something out there. And maybe these things are the same thing. Maybe there's no difference between Far Spirit and Bigfoot. Maybe
I have a big feeling it's all really connected.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on from Bigfoot, I have one more question. From all your research and people's accounts that you've heard, have there ever been any real attacks, like someone being attacked by a Bigfoot?
Yeah. In fact, I know a guy who was, and I very much believe him. It was I just found a brief article, and my first book had to do with a particular area in York County, Pennsylvania, where I live, which is called Toad Road, and a lot of things happen around there. A lot of people were there's this goofy story basically about an insane asylum and stuff that's online, and it's in like the Weird PA and Weird USA books and stuff. It's complete falsehood. There was never an insane asylum on this road. but because of the story and people say there were ghosts and all this stuff that happens around there gets attributed to ghosts. But as I'm reading and doing the research on this, I'm seeing things like people being tracked through the woods and things peeking from behind trees and seeing like red glowing eyes in the woods and things like that. And I said, well, that's all. It sounds like cryptid stuff. That doesn't sound like, ghosts so much to me. And I started looking at it, and interestingly, my wife had gone to day camp in the area across the creek from Toad Road, this area in question, and they had told her one thing, that's the only folklore she could remember about the place from when she was a kid, was don't look behind you on Toad Road. Later on, and all this other stuff comes up, like post-internet, all this stuff about the 7 gates of hell and all this nonsense as regards to Toad Road comes up. But like the first information I ever got on the area, she told me, she said, no, the only thing I remember is they said, don't look behind you on Toad Road. In any case, all these things that people are talking about, it's like, boy, that sounds like cryptid stuff. And I start researching, and I found a story from I think it was 1973, a newspaper article. It was a very brief newspaper article that said this guy was attacked by what he called a green-haired monster on Toad Road, and gave his name. And that's all the information I had. I published that in my first book, and kind of was like, I really want to find this guy. And I looked him up on the internet. He has no internet presence at all. Finally, I looked him up in an old phone book, found an address for him, and wrote him a letter with a stamp, and gave my phone number in the letter. It said, I would like to talk to you about this event that happened that was listed in the newspaper. And he called me, and he said, wow, he's like, I never thought I'd ever have to talk about that again. He said, how did you know about this? And I told him, well, it's in the newspaper. And I ended up sending him, I don't think he'd ever seen the article. I ended up sending him a copy of the article and so forth. But over time, I drew the story out of this guy. And he said that he had been parking there one night. He went up there. It was known as a place to go for like spooky stuff to happen. And that's the reason he went. And his car wouldn't start. So he stopped his car and couldn't get it started again. And he said something kept brushing up against his car, and he would hear it and he couldn't see it. He kept looking for it and he couldn't see whatever it was. He could tell something was brushing up against his car. After a while, this is, 73, it's before cell phones. He said, I just couldn't stay there any longer. I had to go. I think it was December 1st. So it was probably pretty cold. So he gets out of the car, and he said he was so freaked out, he just started running. And he said he ran as fast as he could until he ran into what he called a monster. And I said, well, describe this monster. He said, this is a monster. He said, it was bigger than any man I've ever seen. It was covered with hair. And he said, it beat me down. He said, it threw me to the ground and beat me. And it sent him to the hospital. The original article said he was sent to the hospital with scratches on his face. And he said, no. He said, I spent a week in the hospital after this. So I was trying to get every detail I could about it, and he was very evasive. He would answer a couple questions and then talk about anything else. And this is over the course of months. I'm calling him up and calling him up and calling him up and drawing a little bit more of the story out of him, a little bit more. And the last time I talked to him, he said, I was trying to get a timeline that night because I wanted like a very specific timeline. Like, what time did you leave your car? What time did this happen? And what time did the police get there? Who called the police, et cetera, et cetera. And he just shut me down, and he said, every time I talk to you for 2 weeks afterwards, I wake up screaming at night. So
man.
He said, my girlfriend hates it, and she doesn't want me to talk to you anymore. And that's the last time. He stopped answering my calls. He won't talk to me anymore. My goal isn't to torture the guy. So, I left a couple messages. He never called me back. He's done talking to me. So
yeah.
I believe
it's stuff like that. If they have that much belief in it, it's one of those stories that compels you to be like, you gotta look into something like that,
Yeah. I mean, he I'm not a psychologist. I can't diagnose him with PTSD, but he certainly seemed like he had PTSD, and it was very, very affected by whatever it was. Now, if you want to be a skeptic and say, I think he told me that the cops told him when he gave his police report that he ran into a cow, and he just started laughing. Said, I grew up on a farm. I know what cows are. And then they said, well, you ran into just a guy dressed in furs. And he said, there's no way. He said, no way. Not even Andre the Giant. He said it was like, no way.
Did he say if did it leave him unconscious or just eventually stop beating him? Did he ever say?
The way he described it said it beat him down to the ground. So I don't know how he was found or if he got up, and that was the timeline I was trying to get, was, if he got up and crawled to somebody's house or what,
right.
And asked them to call the police or the ambulance or what. But I know he did end up in the hospital. I am unable to get the police records for this. I've done a request, FOIA request, or it's not federal, so it's the local equivalent of a FOIA request for this police report, and they will not give me the report, and there's nothing I can do to force their hand. It's I've asked several times, they won't give me the police report. So that's not uncommon, though. I've talked to other cops, and they've said it's not really so much a conspiracy as we don't want, it's our career, and we don't want to put weird stuff down on these reports and have that be part of our, record going forward.
That reminds me, there is one more thing I wanted to talk to you about Bigfoot. I heard you discussing one time that there's this sort of like Bigfoot Men in Black type organization of a couple of dudes.
Yeah. I talk about this in volume 2 of Where the Footprints End, in a chapter I have on disappearing evidence. Bigfoot witnesses all over the country report seeing these two guys. And it's particular when you have like really good evidence or a really intense encounter. So people who claim to have shot it and come off with like chunks of flesh, or have like a really, really intense encounter, they'll say that these guys will show up, and sometimes they'll claim to be from the Department of the Interior. Sometimes they'll claim to be from some other government organization. It's two guys all the time. It's one big guy who they describe as a big biker-looking guy. Often they say he's wearing a plaid shirt, big bearded biker-looking guy, and another guy who's more well-dressed. And the big guy is supposed to be really mean and rough and threatening, and the other guy is more polite. They do a good cop, bad cop kind of thing. But basically, they supposedly, according to these witnesses, they threaten them and tell them not to talk about it. And these witnesses all over the country are describing these same two guys. Going back to, I think the earliest one I found was in either the late 70s or early 80s. They'll describe these guys, and they have been known to confiscate evidence, to grab people's evidence and say, we'll take that. And so they kind of answer to the Men in Black. They're kind of like the Bigfoot world equivalent of Men in Black.
Man, that's crazy. Now, earlier you mentioned nature spirits and fairies. And this is something else that I'm fascinated by, especially the stories of people in the past that say that they've been taken by these otherworldly beings and spend time in this other realm, kind of intoxicated with these fairy-like beings. And I'm wondering if you've heard any like more recent accounts or anything at all like this.
I mean, I've even collected a couple Bigfoot reports from the 1800s. There's one especially that reads almost just exactly like one of those old fairy folklore accounts, where this Bigfoot basically takes this kid, takes him underground. It's this strange lighting underground, which is a note. A lot of times people go to the other world, whether it's fairy or the afterworld or whatever, and they'll talk about how the lighting is different. It's like an ambient lighting. It's a different kind of lighting than we have here. And that's consistent throughout these. So that's mentioned, how it was like this strange lighting. You hear strange music, which is another thing with these accounts. And a woman comes out and tells him basically, you better get out of here. You're going to be dinner. And he climbs out and so forth. But it very much reads like, one of these old fairy encounters. As far as like more modern cases, there's Bigfoot cases where people have missing time associated with Bigfoot, and you wonder if there isn't something else going on there. And there's cases of, I've talked to a lot of people who have been what's called pixie-led in the woods, and I've actually experienced this myself, where you get lost in an area that you know very well, or that's a very small area. In my instance, it was probably about an acre, maybe 2 acres of trees that were by a road, of woods rather, by a road. And I got turned around in there with my friend, and we couldn't get out of there. And we could even hear the cars. All we had to do is walk towards the cars. And it was disheartening. We weren't saying much to each other, but I know we kept looking at each other like, what is going on here? And I think it was, if I hadn't been with like another guy, I think it was kind of a little bit of a bravado going on there, that we weren't going to give up. We were going to both be the woodsmen that got out of there. But if I had been alone, I think I might have sat down, and who knows what would have happened then. Because I was getting tired, and it just took us forever. It should not have taken us, over an hour to get out of like, an acre or so of trees. Really, really bizarre. And just hearing the traffic the whole time. Now, I didn't know this was a thing. I mentioned this offhandedly. And it was, I think it was actually Josh heard me talking about it. I said, oh, that's called being pixie-led. That's a thing that happened in fairy encounters. And since that time, I've talked to several other people who've had that same experience, where they're like, I knew these woods. There's no way I could get lost in them. And they just got completely lost for a long period of time.
Wow, that's very interesting. Now, as far as other cryptid-type creatures, what have you ever done any research or come across anyone's experiences with dogmen-type people or werewolf-type entities?
Yeah, I mean, my frustration with the dogman thing in general is, I think sometimes what's happening is researchers, I don't think the witnesses are doing this. I think researchers are leading witnesses that had Bigfoot experiences into calling them dogmen, because dogman is the big, mean new cryptid on the block who's meaner, tougher than Bigfoot. And there's just not, there's just more Bigfoot encounters, let's put it that way. And I think, in fact, I know of one case specifically, because I printed it in my book as a dogman case, and the witness called me and was very upset. So I never said that was a dogman. That's not what I said at all. And, it was much more of a Bigfoot encounter. And she was, very, very upset that in the book, it's printed as this dogman encounter. I had taken it from the researcher who she told her account to. I didn't make that up. That's what the researcher said. He had said, she said he turned it into a dogman account for whatever reason. Again, my suspicion is it's because, dogman's the hip new guy on the street. So I think that's happening sometimes, not all the time. I think that's happening sometimes. My other problem with dogman is that we've had, as a folklore guy, we've had a perfectly good name for this for hundreds of years, and it's been werewolf. And I don't know why we're trying to reinvent things now. And well, I do know why. They're trying to say that there's a breeding population of giant dogmen out there. And I mean, come on. Like, there's nothing in the fossil record that looks anything like this. Dogs are, if you think of dogs as an evolutionary creature, they're pretty damn efficient. They, why would they evolve broad shoulders and opposable thumbs? I mean, maybe the opposable thumbs, raccoons have them and so forth, but why would they evolve broad shoulders and, the dog neck on an upright body? I've heard, physiologists talk about how it just doesn't work. Like, it just physically just doesn't work. There's so many problems with the dogman as a, trying to treat it as a natural creature. Besides the fact that these same people would have you believe now there's a giant ape man out there and a giant dog man, both with breeding populations, it becomes really, really hard to accept. So to me, we should probably look at werewolf lore and look at these things as, supernatural creatures, as they always have been treated. To me, the interesting thing about the dogman reports that I've heard, now I know there's been attacks attributed to dogman, but to my knowledge, no one's ever actually seen it happen. I might be wrong. I don't listen to every, dogman report out there, but what I've listened to, I can't remember anyone actually seeing it attack anybody. But what it does do is it intimidates the heck out of people. It gets up on people really close and scares the heck out of them. And you wonder if it's not in some way somehow feeding off of that fear, because, something that big could easily, tear a person in half and eat them, no problem. But it doesn't seem to be happening. What it seems to be is showing itself to people, sometimes even getting very close to people and scaring the heck out of them.
Oh, that's very interesting. What are your thoughts on winged humanoids such as like Mothman? Do you have any encounter stories to talk about those entities?
I've taken. Well, I didn't take the report. My friend took the report, but it occurred in that same area of Toad Road of a someone, basically they were parked. They were looking for deer, and across the field was a woman and her mother, and they said for some reason her mother looked in the rearview mirror and said, "Turn around." And they turned around and they saw this thing just rise up behind their car and open up wings and shoot off into the sky. So, reports have been around, and I've certainly heard some other reports here and there. Lon Strickler has taken a lot of reports of what he calls the Conewango Phantom, which is answers to a Mothman description. It just happens along the Conewango Creek here. There can't be again, talking about these weird cryptids, like there's not a breeding population of Mothman out there. You're not going to find like a Mothman nest with like eggs and a baby Mothman in it or something. So this has to be something other. It has to be something, supernatural. It has to be something that either comes from somewhere else, whether it's another dimension, or, it's maybe the modern equivalent of what people were seeing, like fairies and stuff in the past.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That's what I want to get into is there's these UFO researchers that insist that these beings are coming from different parts of the galaxy in their little tin cans. They're coming in their little UFOs to visit us and study us or whatever they're doing. And, the more research and the more I look into it, my intuition tells me that whatever these things are, they're here. And they're around us at all times, just on a different spectrum to where we can't see them, and they're not at all what they think. They think they are. They're not aliens like most people understand aliens. I think it's all part of the same phenomenon. It's all connected to our consciousness, and if we can just tap into a certain frequency, we can better see this hidden realm that's all around us at all times. And like I said, I don't think these ETs are traveling in their ships, although they may have some sort of ship or transportation. I don't know, but I think they're here at all times. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's something else going there, and people love to like, well, it's interdimensional. Well, we don't know that either. I mean, like, probably, maybe, I don't know.
Right.
But I would say, yeah, I think they're somehow here. They're somehow connected to us. It's somehow part of our experience as a human. The problem with all this stuff is evidence, and how fleeting the evidence is. I mean, Bigfoot in a way has the best evidence with these footprints, very, very convincing footprints. But if you think of it in terms of saints' relics, so you have a primary relic is like maybe the fingernail of a saint or a piece of the hair of the saint. It's something that came from the saint. Then you have secondary relics, and these are things that the saint has touched. So maybe it's the saint's prayer cloth or a part of his robe or something. I like to describe it that way because so you have your primary relics of Bigfoot or aliens or anything, like samples of hair in terms of Bigfoot, or blood samples, DNA scat samples. They are always inconclusive. They always come back inconclusive. They can't tell you what it is. Two experts will disagree. One will tell you, oh, it's nothing. The other tell you, it's something special, whatever the case, they're always inconclusive. The secondary relics, the footprints, great. There's some amazing footprints that certainly say like something stepped here, but they're just secondary relics. Primary relics, not only are they inconclusive, but they tend to disappear. And this goes with ghost evidence. This goes with UFO evidence as well. Any kind of time you get primary evidence, it doesn't hang around very long. If it does, it's going to be completely inconclusive. People will fight over it forever. So there seems to be something about the phenomena in general, all of this stuff that's kind of saying, we're here, but we're not here. Josh has a great quote, and I forget where he got the quote from, but it's one of these contactees and the Greys or whatever form of quote unquote alien that were contacted said to this person, "We want you to believe in us, but not too much."
Right. Yeah, it's so fascinating. What about Orbs. What are your thoughts on manifestation of orbs? I mean, I know they have where you can take pictures and it's probably most likely dust. I'm talking about the ones you can see with your visible eyes. Have you ever experienced it or have any stories about them?
I have, not only have I experienced it, but I have an area where I have been taking skeptics. Very, very a great friend of mine and associated with my podcast, and he very, very skeptical of what I was seeing. He's a guy who spends a lot of time in the woods. He's a naturalist, and he was convinced. I'm telling him about these lights I'm seeing, and he was convinced that he was going to go and explain everything that I was seeing, because we were seeing just weird lights in the woods. And I've taken people there several times. Now I took Soraya from Where Did the Road Go, and he didn't see anything. I took Josh, and he didn't see anything. But many other people I've taken, and sure enough, these weird orbs and stuff are there. These weird lights in the woods. Sometimes they take the form of orbs. Sometimes they don't look super impressive when you first see them. They look like something man-made. And in fact, when I first saw them, I was convinced, oh, that's something, something man-made out there. And then they start moving and changing colors and acting weird and doing all this other stuff. And like very shortly after, I thought, no, that's I don't know of any man-made light that does that.
And have you ever experienced where you kind of made like a communication with these orbs, or they kind of indicated that they were communicating in a way?
Yeah. So the first time I saw him, I was with a fellow who was ex-military, and he had with him a green laser that was military rated for 10 miles. So very powerful handheld laser. And we're looking at these things, and they're changing colors and they're moving around. And I said, his name was JR. I said, JR, hit that thing with that laser. Let's see what happens. And he turned the laser on. Now, it took him a while to get it trained in on it. And he finally hit it, and it turned red and kind of apertured out. So it didn't blink right out, but it would kind of like turn red and then just kind of aperture out, kind of turn out like that gradually, like over the course of maybe 2 seconds. It would just kind of aperture down and turn off. And then, maybe a minute later, it would come back on. And we repeated this. At that night, more and more lights popped on. By the time we were done, the woods was full of lights. I want to say like 6 or 8 of them at any time. You could catch these lights. And he hit every single one of them with that laser, and every single one of them did the same thing. They would turn red and go out every single time. Now, I know of no man-made light that does this. So there was that. And then the other time I took my friend John, the one who's skeptical about it, and we went up there. This was in this late spring here. And we went up and hiked into the area, and we just sat there. We got there before nightfall, and was like, let's just sit and see what happens. And he's looking around. He's like, and I said, you'll know it when you see it. Like you have to look for him, but you'll know it when you see it. There won't be any question. Like it won't be, are these fireflies? There won't be any question. Once you see him, you'll see him. And on this night, not only did we see him, and he saw him, and I was very happy because he was like laughing. He was so blown away. Like, wow, you really are seeing things up here, Tim. I was like, I told you. But they came right up to us that night. So this area is it's another old closed road, and we were standing on the old roadbed right at the tree line, and these would come up right to the tree line, and they're about the size of ping pong balls. At one point, even John was like dropped to his knees and tried to grab one of these things. They were that close, and like everyone there was 4 people there. Everyone saw them, and everyone agreed that it seemed like they were coming up to check us out, like for whatever reason. It seemed very, very interested in us. So they would come over and just kind of hover around and basically blink out eventually.
Wow, that's crazy. Now I want to get into some paranormal phenomenon here, but before we do, are there any other stories or experiences of strange phenomenon that you've personally experienced that really sticks out for you and was kind of like a really profound experience?
My favorite, which is I thought it ended, but it's still ongoing, as so that very first instance when you asked me if I ever saw anything in the woods, I said there was that big gray thing that I didn't know what it was. So that happened on the north end of that area, Toad Road I was talking about. It's not a road anymore. It's been closed since 1972, Hurricane Agnes. It's barely a path at places. It's private. No one should be out there. I was there with my friend hiking in it was in March, I believe. And I like to hike the entire road at least once a year, end to end. It's just something I like to do because I've written 2 books about it, and it's just kind of, it's like a little ritual I do. I'll hike the entire road. It ends up being, I don't know, it's not a super long hike, but it can be a hard hike because there's a lot of trees down and stuff. But I was there with my friend, and we hiked in, and for whatever reason, he didn't want to do the whole road. So we turned around and we hiked back. And on the way back, in the middle of the trail, I found a raccoon skull. Now, again, I've been collecting skulls my whole life. My eyes are very tuned to that color of bone in the woods because I'm always looking for them. I always want to pick them up. It was right in the middle of the trail. It would have been very unusual. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would have been very unusual for me to step over this thing and not see it on the way in. So, I picked it up. Wow, look at that. Raccoon skull. Cool. Put it in my pack. Made plans with this friend to come back. I said, I want to hike the whole road. Let's come back, next week and do this. And for whatever reason, he canceled the next week. He canceled the week after that. And finally, it's been like 3 weeks have gone by, 2 or 3 weeks, and he's just not coming with me. And I thought, well, I want to do this. I want to hike the whole road, so I'm going back out there again. I'll just do it by myself. So I go back out this day, and I get to about the place where I found the raccoon skull on the trail, and I heard something, just a branch crack or something up ahead. I look up. That's when I see this big thing, whatever it is, just a quick glimpse of it, just a very, very quick glimpse. Shoot off into the woods. It's headed south, and it's not out of bravery. I'm not a super brave guy. I don't know why I followed this thing. I just took off after it. And as fast as I could, through this. Now, this is into April. The weeds are growing up. It's like stinging nettles. And I saw a copperhead that day. It's not a nice place. It's not a fun hiking trail. This isn't a place anyone should be or anyone would really want to be. This is a place you have to, you've got to be determined and probably have a reason for being there. So I went in the direction of this thing. I never saw it again. And I probably went a half mile, maybe less. And right there in the middle of the trail, impaled on a tree branch at eye level, perfectly at eye level, was a deer skull. And it wasn't there 3 weeks before when I was there with my friend. Now, could a person come down and done that? Sure. But why? They would have had to come down. They would either had to have a deer skull with them or find one, impale it on that branch. For what reason? I don't know. And they shouldn't have been down there. And it's not a fun place to be. It's not like someplace you go to hang out for fun. It's especially in the spring and summer. It's really nasty hiking down in there. It's swampy and it's just nasty. So here I find the skull and I pick it up and I had a lot of Bigfoot researchers say, oh, that was a warning. They were warning you to stay out of their hunting area. For whatever feelings are worth. I mean, I don't know what they're worth, but for whatever feelings are worth, the feeling I got when I picked this skull up was, you like that other one? You're really going to like this. How about this big one? So right. And I was just really taken with it and put it in my pack. And that was the end of my hike that day. I was like too blown away. I wasn't scared at all. I didn't feel like anything was watching me or anything. I was just kind of blown away by the fact that I find this skull there. And I got this feeling.
Yeah, I think our feelings are really important when it comes to this stuff. The feeling you get when dealing with it, and the synchronicities as well are so important. Whenever you start experiencing them, I think that they're trying to lead you, whether it's your guides or your higher self or whatever this phenomenon is, it's trying to kind of lead you down a certain direction, and you're supposed to follow these synchronicities that feel right to you. Would you?
Yeah, agree? Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the thing that happened after this, though, is I do a lot of Bigfoot investigations. I meet a lot of witnesses. I do a lot of other paranormal investigations. On, I'd say, 70%, it might even be higher, quite honestly, of investigations I've been on since that time, I have found clean skulls sitting out in the open. These aren't things I'm digging around in bushes for, I'm crawling on my knees, finding them. No, these are left out in the open, right in the area where I'm doing investigations, as if they're left for me. And it's the second one I found after this. I was doing a Bigfoot investigation. A guy had seen two creatures across his property. He wouldn't even go over there. It was across a pond. I went over. I got there within a day or two of him seeing him. He's like, I'm not going over there. And I was like, all right, no problem. I'll go over. And I said, tell me where to stop, where the creatures were, where you saw them. And he told me to stop. And I did some other stuff like how tall were they, et cetera, et cetera. When I'm done that, I looked down right at my feet, perfectly clean deer skull. Went on another Bigfoot investigation in Michaud Forest, and this guy had several experiences where different things had happened. Every stop he took me to, I found a deer skull. Or one place I found multiple. I found like 2 or 3 deer skulls. And this was just the beginning. And since then, like I said, I've been collecting these skulls my entire life. Since then, I have so many that we had to start putting them outside. There's like too many to keep in the house. There's nice. So many of them. They just keep coming to me. At one point, I thought it had stopped. I thought, oh, they're not leaving me skulls anymore, because we've been on a few investigations where it didn't happen. And we were in Maryland. We were doing an investigation of this ghost of this guy named Lee Master. And this guy owned an old iron furnace. But it said in life, when he was alive, he would dress up like a ghost and he would jump out and scare people in this area. And then like he dies and supposedly his ghost lives on, et cetera, et cetera. As we're in the woods behind his property, or what was his property, I found a plastic Halloween skull just out in the middle of the woods. We were not on a trail. We were literally like cutting off a trail, cutting between 2 trails because it was just a quicker way for us to go from one place to another. So we was like, well, we'll just cut through this area. So not even on a trail, nowhere, just a plastic Halloween skull. I picked it up and I thought, oh, that's funny. I'm still getting skulls. And then somebody else told me, he said, that guy used to dress up and scare people. Like, what better thing, like representation of him than a plastic Halloween skull? It's like, you know what? You're absolutely right about that. Absolutely right.
Wow.
And most recently, I found. So again, we were back on. It was my Toad Road hike this year. I was with my investigation partner Chad, and we were in an area, and I found a pig skull. Now, there's no wild boar in this area of Pennsylvania, and there's no pig farms around this area of Toad Road. But what there is an old report that I had dug up of a guy. Because when I was doing the research on this area of Toad Road, I was looking for anything weird that happened, including unexpected deaths and so forth. Well, there was a story from, I think it was 1909 or sometime before 1920, of a kid who was slaughtering pigs out there, and had killed one, and he had a revolver in his pocket that dropped out of his pocket and went off, and it shot him through the heart. I think it killed him, or shot him above his heart, but I do think he died from it. So there's this note of this kid slaughtering pigs out there in the newspaper, and I found a pig skull with a small caliber bullet wound right in its head. And I thought, what the heck is this? Like, there's no pigs out here. And this wouldn't mean anything to anybody else but me. No one else is like, I don't even think I published that article in the book, because it was just, another article of something weird happening there. Right. And then on the way back, Chad found another pig skull. So we found, in the same day, and again, these are right on the path, 2 pig skulls in the day. And like, I don't know if they're the actual pig skulls that this kid, when he was slaughtering pigs there and he ended up hurting himself. I don't know that. But the fact that there's 2 pig skulls and one has a small caliber, bullet hole right in the forehead was pretty incredible to me. That was pretty like, wow. And it meant a lot finding him there. And it wouldn't have meant anything to anybody else.
Yes, that is crazy. Man, you got to love those synchronicities. That's amazing when that stuff happens.
Yeah, it's thrilling. I mean, it really is addictive.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of getting started in experiencing some of this stuff myself. But what I want to move into now is you mentioned how you were, in going on a ghost investigation, and you do paranormal investigations as well. I found from some of the other investigators that I've interviewed and a few people that have experienced hauntings that there are, many different types, but a lot of them seem to come from especially people's houses where there's a lot of negative energy in the house coming from the people themselves. Is this
Mhm.
something you find?
Yeah, I think people often haunt themselves, for lack of a better word. Getting people to accept Bigfoot is not an ape and it may be something else it's a big fight, and I was willing to take that fight on, and other people have taken the fight on of trying to convince people that aliens aren't little scientists from outer space. Someone needs to take on these ghost hunters and present them the idea that maybe these things are not the souls of dead people. Maybe there's something else. Maybe there's something that's presenting themselves as the souls of dead people. Maybe sometimes they're the souls of dead people, but not every time are they. The ghost hunter frame of mind seems to be either soul of dead person or demon. Those are the two settings for most ghost hunters. And they really need to. Somebody really needs to take that on. That's not going to be me. I'm not climbing that mountain. But somebody should introduce that idea to the ghost hunting world, because they really are locked into this idea of it's got to be the soul of a dead person. So who died here and why are they haunting you? When I think oftentimes, like you said, these people are kind of haunting themselves. It's which is to me no less fascinating.
Something else, I don't know if you've, given this any research, is, just the, I guess, leftover energy or the memories or the energetic memory of a past event that kind of sticks around and remanifests.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's huge. I was actually in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania last night. They say it's, the most haunted place in the country, if not the world. That many people died in one little area. Like, there's some kind of energy there that does something, and in some, like, I'm not saying in every case it's not the soul of it. Maybe it is the soul of dead people sometimes. I don't know. But yeah, that energy does something, in my opinion. How is it stored? How is it used? What happens there? Is it the energy that we put into these places? Because, so much has happened there. I don't know. We were at a place they call Suicide Bridge last night. And, so the story goes, several people have hanged themselves from this bridge and killed themselves. I can't find any evidence of that. I've looked up the newspaper articles. Maybe I just haven't looked the right way. Maybe they exist. But as far as I know, I can't find any evidence of that. But again, here we're at a place where, weird stuff happens. And a lot of people have documented a lot of weird stuff happen. So at some point, does the idea of all this, these negative things, the idea of these suicides happen there, does that create something, does it kind of create a haunting, in other words, that's there, because again, unless I'm missing them, I can't find these, certainly people hanging themselves on a bridge would make the newspaper. I cannot find these articles that suggest this has happened there. So, what's going on there?
Right. Well, you mentioned, demons and how that's, most likely a huge misunderstanding in the paranormal community. And I was just wondering what your thoughts on possession are. People who believe or possibly are overcome with some type of entity, or, they believe it, or there's something going on there. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the demon thing, and the way I get kind of sarcastic about it is because, like I said, a lot of people have, like, either everything's demons, for people, like, no matter what it is, it's a demon, or, like I said, the ghost hunters, they have two settings. They have, soul of dead person or demon. It's not that I don't think there can't ever be a demon or something that answers to that description. I just think it's an overused term in the paranormal community. So, I do believe there are things that, I've talked to people who had these really, really negative, what they feel entities are, things that I would certainly say were demonic in nature, were very, very negative, and certainly answer to the description of demons. And yeah, I mean, I think people can get possessed sometimes. I think it's, again, probably most of the time it's something they are doing to themselves, but I don't think it matters at that point. So, in terms of illness, we all, my wife and I often talk about psychosomatic illnesses, and somebody will tell you, like, if you're a person that has high stress levels, for instance, a lot of anxiety, they'll tell you, like, well, that's all in your head. Well, yeah, but it's no less real. Like just because just because it emanates from my head, it's no less real. And I think it's the same with many, not all possessions. So when I say it emanates from them, that's not saying it's not real. I'm just saying this is something that is sort of broken in them, and that could answer to the same description as a demon. Maybe where people are building their own demons the way they're haunting themselves.
Right. Yeah. Very well said. Now, have you experienced anything or anyone you know where you're doing an investigation and you feel like something from that investigation kind of follows you or follows someone with you and around or leaves the investigation with you? Has that ever occurred?
I've had a lot of people talk to me about this because, especially in light of these like gifting exchanges that I've done with whatever in the woods, and I've often brought this stuff home. Brother Richard Hendrick, who's been on Strange Familiars, is a very, very knowledgeable man. He gave me some great advice, and that like there's nothing wrong with taking it, but just give it away again, which I thought was really, really wonderful advice as far as that stuff. Like it's kind of like it's not yours; it's something that was given to you to re-gift in a sense. This stuff I do bring it home. For whatever period of time. And a lot of people have said, like, aren't you worried about like bringing something out? No, I mean, not particularly. I've never had anything like that. I've never worried about it. Now, I have my own sort of, ways of protecting myself, I guess you'd say, or ways of being protected, that are sort of in place. So I know a lot of people do like special rituals and so forth. And, I'm much more of I don't want to get into my own, personal spiritual beliefs and stuff, but I lean towards the Catholic. Certainly I was raised Catholic and so forth. So, I feel I have that covered in other ways. So I just don't worry about it. That said, I've heard a lot of stories of people who's like, yeah, I brought this home and basically, my house was haunted then because I brought this thing in my house and it was haunted until I got rid of this thing. So, a big part of the paranormal is witnesses. We don't have a lot of, that's our best evidence is witness testimony. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I got to believe them when they say these things. I think it happens. It's not happened to me personally.
Right. Now, to close out tonight, I want to talk a little UFOs. I want to get your thoughts on what's been happening for the past couple of years in the mainstream media, the Pentagon releasing information saying, oh, yeah, by the way, they're real. We may even have some exotic off-planet material to share with you. The To the Stars Academy, all this stuff that's been happening the past couple of years that what appears to be some kind of strange slow drip disclosure. I have never trusted anything coming out of the media or government anyway, so I don't trust it, but I think it's interesting. I think it's something to look at and maybe pay attention to, and I'm saying this based on the information that I received last night, that it may really be something to pay attention to, which I'll have to talk about later. But I'd like to get your thoughts on, do you think that they're trying to prepare us, or is there some other agenda, or what are your thoughts on this whole new disclosure thing?
Yeah, I mean, so I read the article recently, I think it was a New York Times article, where they're talking about this material they have and that they think might be, not of this world or something like that. The wording was very wishy-washy. They didn't say that we have a craft that came from not of this world that we can't explain. They said they have some materials. Well, back through time, we've always had materials we can't explain. I mean, they have in the UK, they have a little fairy shoe. It's made out of mouse leather with impossibly small stitching that they can't explain really how this was made. And it appears to be this little shoe they know it's made from mouse leather, and it has this like tiny stitching that doesn't seem like a human hand could do. What is it? It's this sort of relic of something. We've had, these unknown materials from Bigfoot. We've had ectoplasm from ghosts, this unknown material that's there. And we've had unknown materials left from UFOs, this, UFO slag, I believe they call it, for years that people have been able to like undetermined what it is. So this is nothing new they're presenting this with. They're just saying like, okay, this is stuff. What I think is probably going on, this is just my gut feeling. I don't have any special insight in this, and I don't pay a ton of attention to the Stars Academy stuff. But what I think is probably going on is this is the government crowdsourcing sightings because Russia or China or somebody else has some technology that we don't have yet, and they want to crowdsource these sightings to find out where these things are popping up. And that's just my gut telling me what's going on with this. That's why suddenly the government's behind it, because they're trying to gather information.
Yeah, I've had similar thoughts, and I'm just wondering why. Yes, you're correct. It's been throughout the ages they've always talked about this stuff, but the past couple of years there's been a little bit more of a special emphasis on it, and the whole UFO, just the whole term UFO has been popping up a lot more, and I do have to question, why now, why the agenda and everything like that. But yeah, you're definitely right. It is something that has been going on. And I think that they possibly either already have technology or it is some kind of race for technology, however they've got their hands on it, that they've got something that they will probably eventually release to the public. But you're probably right. It has something to do mainly with some kind of something they don't want to know us about that they either already have or fighting for or something like that. It does make sense.
Yeah, for as long as I've been interested in this stuff, it's always been, disclosures around the corner. It's coming next week. By the way, buy a membership to my website so you can hear about it first.
Yeah. Another thing, as far as people's experiences of actually being abducted and taken on ships, and say, having experiences where they're having eggs taken from them or sperm, or they see their hybrid children and are interacting with these beings of a reptilian nature or insect nature. What are your thoughts on what's happening here? Because we have there's so many different types that they have the ones where people are missing time and all of a sudden they wake up on the ship and they're being experimented on, or somewhere they're going to sleep and they wake up, or they'll actually phase through their wall being taken by little gray entities. I'd like to get your thoughts on the whole abduction phenomenon.
I mean, there's just so much bizarreness associated with it too. It's the kind of thing like for every, Bigfoot account that just sounds like a hairy man walking through the woods, you can find 2 or 3 where something really bizarre happens that makes it sound like way more and way crazier than just a hairy man walking through the woods.
Right.
It seems to be the same thing with these abduction things. Like for every one that sounds like, again, these little gray scientists taking people onto the ship to do experiments on them. There's ones that start with a giant bunny man knocking on somebody's window, and then then a UFO comes, and then these just bizarre things, or polka dot squirrels that hop around or something. This bizarre stuff that goes with this stuff that throws this question mark around it, like is this what we think it is? Josh has done a lot of work sort of comparing the alien abduction experience to fairy abduction and so forth in the past, and I think what's going on is sort of the modern expression of that. We view all of these things through a cultural lens, and they change over time. UFOs have changed over time. I think our concept of aliens have changed over time, and our concept of wildman, of the Bigfoot, what we call Bigfoot now, has changed over time as well. So these things, sort of changed as viewed through our cultural lens, and I think this is what we have now is the modern, whatever version of the fairy abduction is. This is sort of the modern version of that.
Yeah, I think so. Very well said. And something tells me, as more researchers like yourself and other people just keep digging into this, we will have a better understanding. Although I don't think we'll ever have a complete understanding of what's going on with all of this. But Timothy, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. Before you head out, let everyone know where they can find your podcast, anything else you're working on, and anything else interesting you might have upcoming.
Sure. So I've got 5 books out, 4 written by me and 1, again, with my co-author Joshua Cutchin. You can find all those on Amazon if you look up Timothy Renner. or the new book's called Where the Footprints End. We should have volume 2 of that out this year, like I said. You can find me at strangefamiliars.com. That's my podcast, and everything connected to me, you should find links there. So, and all that contact information goes right to me. So again, that's strangefamiliars.com.
Awesome. Timothy, thank you so much again. That was great information, and there's so much more that we could talk about. I will definitely have you back on in the future.
Absolutely. Love to do it. Thank you.
All right. Have a great night.
You as well.